To get the PG-13 rating, did you cut out like the flayed skin and such?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We didn't quite. Can you imagine Hellraiser meets Chauncey? That
That'd
would
be
be a
amazing.
very specific film.
So in the movie, there's an important summoning ritual, if you will. And I was wondering if we wanted to summon you, what would the Jeff Wadlow summoning ritual entail? What would we need to gather to make that happen?
I love that question. Certainly, if you got together a bunch of my favorite actors and a cool script and the budget to make a movie, you couldn't stop me from showing up.
Well, who are some of the actors that we maybe would have in this that you're like, yes, I have arrived. I've been summoned.
Oh, my dream. Well, obviously, a lot of the actors I've worked with in the
Mhm,
past, I love. But if we were to have a little fun with this game and say I couldn't use anyone I've already used,
mhm.
um, very high on my list would be Bradley Cooper. I mean, I would do just about anything to work with that guy. I think he is a genius. Um, if he was willing to be in a movie that he wasn't directing, I would be overjoyed. But obviously, there's a long list. I'm a fan of actors. I love actors. I was an actor for a split second, realized I did not have enough talent to even be in a commercial, and have since then just developed a fond appreciation for brilliant actors and just love working with them.
Let's say you're writing a role, you're crafting a role specifically for Bradley Cooper in a horror movie. What does that look like?
Ooh, well now I'm giving away the good stuff. I got to hold on to this, right? I mean, if I'm
Well,
ever going to nab the guy, get him to be in one of my movies, I better
maybe
hit him
he's
with
going to
something
see this and he's
surprising.
going to be like, "Oh, I'm hooked. I gotta have my people call Jeff's people," and then that's how it goes.
Honestly, probably what I would say to him is I would say, um, what do you want to do that you've never done before? What's the most bonkers idea you've ever had? And then I would run with it and I would make it a horror movie. I'd find that horror movie angle. Honestly, that is what I do. If you really look at my career, a lot of my projects have been the result of someone challenging me with an idea or a title or a piece of material and saying, "We can't figure this out. We don't know what to do with this. Can you do it?" And that's how I would approach working with Mr. Cooper. I'd say, challenge me. What's something that you've always wanted to explore on screen, and let's do it together.
I love that. And then like the behind the scenes series of the making of this would be called Working with Mr. Cooper. I
Yes, well
We're
played.
set. We have this all ready to go. We're like, I'm here
Well,
for it.
let's do it. Bradley, I'm available.
Yes. He watches this, so he's definitely going to see this for sure.
Great, fantastic.
So Chauncey's Imaginary World that was a very cool, fun moment, and it reminded me a lot of things that I watched when I was a kid that I was a fan of. You get like elements of Escher's Relativity, which I did not know when I was a kid. I was not that
Mhm.
pretentious. Alice in Wonderland, but also Labyrinth. And I'm wondering, was
Yeah,
any of that in like conscious inspiration, like in the conversation at all when you guys were kind of creating this look?
absolutely. I mean, how could we not look at the works of Escher and Lewis Carroll? We also talked a lot about Maurice Sendak.
Mhm.
The film Labyrinth was a touchstone, but even a bigger touchstone was Pan's Labyrinth. So that kind of horror fantasy subgenre was a big part of our process and the discussions we had about that world. Like I feel like it's sort of a subgenre that's underserved now. I think you get some more horror sci-fi or sort of straight up horror, gothic horror, but horror fantasy, you don't really see many of those anymore. Hellraiser, honestly, was another film series we talked about. I mean, I just love that space. I'm very much a child of the 80s and the 90s. So as you can imagine, I love all those movies.
To get the PG-13 rating, did you cut out like the flayed skin and such?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We didn't quite. Can you imagine Hellraiser meets Chauncey? That
That'd
would
be
be a
amazing.
very specific film.
You, you have the kids running down the hall, and there's just like a flayed person. I'm like, oh, turn around, run the other way.
I mean, look, that's kind of it's a little bit of a spoiler, but I mean, I think people are going to think they're walking into a movie in the haunted toy subgenre, and the truth is, the movie is much more part of the horror fantasy subgenre.
I do have to ask, there's a quicksandish scene without getting into spoilery things.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, I had a prevalent fear of quicksand. I have yet to encounter it in my real life, but was that a thing for you? Were you affected by this as a child? And is that why you included it?
I just feel when you're making a horror fantasy, you want to look for ways to kind of bend reality in a manner that creates a very real but visceral, scary sequence.
Mhm.
And saying that the floor is quicksand works. I mean, you get all that claustrophobia, that feeling of something pressing on your chest. I mean, to authentically answer your question, no, I was never trapped in quicksand, so I can't say it's like some personal trauma of mine. But what that scene does remind me of is another horror fantasy franchise that I should have mentioned as both an inspiration and one of my favorites, and that's Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, I would describe that very much as a horror fantasy. More, it's similar to our film in that it kind of masquerades as a slasher, but it's
Mhm.
really a horror fantasy franchise, especially in the later films. Like once you get into Dream Warriors, I mean, it just goes nuts, and that was certainly a touchstone for us.
What's your number one Nightmare on Elm Street film?
Dream Warriors,
Dream
easy.
Warriors, okay.
Oh, it's so much fun.
For the theme
Anytime, I mean,
song alone?
yeah, I mean, well, it's basically a superhero movie, right? Like
Yeah.
anytime, like people get to like get together, form a team, and fight back. I mean, yeah, I'm on board.
Here for it. Which
Yeah.
of the powers would you want to have if you could have a Dream Warrior power? Which one would you be?
Ooh, I don't know. I think I would just kind of come up with my own thing.
Oh, okay. What would it be?
Um, I mean, my dream warrior power would be, I think I would want to be able to, ooh, I think I would want to be able to read everyone's minds. I know that's like a very subtle, less visceral
Mhm.
power, but I think if you know what everyone's thinking, you've got the upper hand. It's like playing chess and knowing the next move before they make it. So yeah, I think I would go with mind reading.
Do you think that would stress you out, or do you think you would be able to tune out when you didn't want to like be tuned into it?
I think you'd have to have the ability to turn it off, or you would
Yeah,
go
you'd have to
insane.
practice a
Yeah,
lot, I
I'd have to
think.
go insane. Yeah, I'd have to go insane. Well, what is it? Was it I guess it was Dead Zone when Christopher Walken, if he shook someone's hand, he could kind of see their future. Maybe
Yes.
that's how we should create this power together. Is
Okay.
that I can read people's minds when I touch them, right? I'm sure there's some X-Men that has that version of that
Yeah.
power.
Is there a horror subgenre you haven't really done yet that you would like to explore? You've kind of, I mean, you kind of have horror fantasy baked into things, but that's not necessarily the prevalent thing. But is there anything you like, just you straight up have not touched this genre, but you would like to go into that?
I'd love to do more of like a hardcore horror action film, sort of like
Mhm.
Evil Dead or something like
Ooh,
that,
okay.
or Aliens, right?
Uh-huh.
Where it's got all those tropes of a really scary movie, but then you know when the shit hits the fan, we get to fight back. Like I always wanted to do like a Friday the 13th movie where survivors from all the different movies, like come back and hunt
Mm,
Jason. You know what I mean? Like that kind
yeah,
of idea. Just like something where you kind of start the movie as a horror movie, but then it really turns into a full on action movie.
I would watch that as well. That sounds very fun.
Yeah.
So if you were the final girl in a horror movie and licensing did not exist, what would your kill song be?
Wow.
And is it a
Wow.
song that you've already used in one of your movies, or is there a song that you're like, this would be a killer one, but we just haven't gotten to use it?
I really wanted to use this song in a movie like 15 years ago, but we couldn't afford it. And I think it would be fun to have it be my kill song, especially since there is no budget. Um, it would be "Bleed It Out" by Linkin Park.
Okay, all right. Why do you choose that one? What is it? What speaks to you about that one?
I don't know. I just like the way it builds and the
Mhm.
tempo of it, and it's just got a real like, all right, you know, here we go. You want, you know, fuck around and find out kind of energy, right?
I love it. And that's the line that you say like as you're lacing up your boots, the last
Yes,
when you make the bow, fuck around and find out.
yes, yeah.
Close up and then you go for it.
I mean, it would be some pretty significant plagiarism if I did that, but our version of that line is
Our version of that, inspired by. Yeah.
inspired by "Fuck Around and Find Out."
Is there any chance of an imaginary sequel in the works?
Well, I've been asked this question a couple times. I'll tell you this: anyone who plans a sequel can probably count on the fact that there won't be a sequel.
Uh-huh.
You know, like I've heard of all these filmmakers being like, well, I actually have a trilogy mapped out. I'm like, good luck with that. You know, put all your good ideas into your film. And that's what we have done here. I put all the good ideas that we could come up with into this movie. That being said, if the movie resonates with an audience, if there's a desire for a sequel, the movie is called Imaginary. It's literally about the power of imagination. We would have to be totally creatively bankrupt to not be able to come up with a sequel about imagination.
What do you think that would look like? Would we be following completely different characters because the world is so expansive, you can go in so many different directions?
Yeah, oof. I'm just shooting from the hip, so none of this means anything.
Okay.
Um, but I do feel like we would have to sort of follow kind of like an aliens kind of structure, where even though you could make the movie about different imaginary friends and different characters and different parts of the world, even, I think DeWanda, Jessica, is kind of our Ellen Ripley in this series, and I think we would want to spend more time with her and see how she's grown and changed from the experience of this first film, and see what she does with those lessons and what that ultimately means for the imaginary world and Chauncey. Because don't forget, um, you know, we sort of, this is a bit of a spoiler. Are we doing spoilers?
You can do spoilers. I can hold this part
Spoiler.
if you'd like. Okay. Spoiler alert.
I mean, her creativity is special, Jessica's, right? Like it's something more than just the normal amount of imagination that a person brings to a interaction with an imaginary friend. It's almost like a catnip for her, for
Yes.
Chauncey. So I think we would have to explore that a little bit more.
I love that. I feel like there's a lot more story there, so I'd be very curious to see how that might unfold if given the chance.
Yes, I agree. I would listen. I would love to do it. I would love to make another movie with DeWanda and Jason Blum, and honestly, everyone who worked on this film. It was really probably the most positive experience I've had in Hollywood so far.
Hell yeah. If you could do a sequel or another installment to any movie in your repertoire, what would you choose aside from Imaginary?
Well, I got in a little bit of trouble for a similar question
Oh
to
no.
this one earlier in the week when I talked about the sequel for Truth or Dare that never happened.
Why did you get in trouble
Um,
for that?
I mean, it's just, it's sort of talking out of school. I guess trouble is the wrong word. I got a lot of attention for it. I
Oh,
mean,
okay, yes.
I mentioned it to a reporter from Variety, and I think about 45 other outlets reprinted the story.
Yeah.
Um, so let's take Truth or Dare off the table too. So if I was going to
Okay.
pick something else that I'd worked on that I would want to make a sequel to, I mean, it will never happen. But I would love to make a sequel to Fantasy Island. Again, this is another spoiler, but the way that movie ends is we sort of set up the classic dynamic from the show. At the end of the movie, we have our work, we have our tattoo, standing on the dock, ready to welcome new guests. So it's sort of a weird kind of prequel in the end, and so it would be fun to move that forward and kind of show how their dynamic evolves and just have fun with what other guests we could bring to the island.
Jeff, thank you so much. I'm excited for everyone to check this out on the 8th. Oh, you went through the pop-up experience.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that?
I loved it. Yeah, it was super fun. It was like, well, I mean, I've done two. We've got the Chauncey's Playhouse, which is sort of like a 3-week long experience. Then they did one at the Melrose Trading Post, which is another pop up on Sunday. I mean, the marketing for this film has been really fantastic. So creative. I mean, it's a very fertile world. They've had a lot to work with, but the team at Lionsgate has just embraced it and pulled out all the stops. I mean, they're putting out so many interesting pieces on social media. I mean, every day there's something new. And I made the movie. I sort of feel like at a certain point you're going to run out of things to include or give too much away, but they're just so creative. I've really enjoyed working with them, and I think they're honestly fantastic storytellers. And the marketing, for me at least, is a part of the storytelling experience, because you're beginning the dialogue with the audience through those marketing materials.
Amazing. And shout out to Lionsgate.
Killing it. Killing it, guys.
Yeah, crushing it. All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, and congratulations.